Thank you. Good morning and welcome to all of you who are joining us here in person in North Salt Lake. Thanks for being here, and thank you to all of you joining us online. We appreciate you being part of this LPC meeting. Today is the Legislative Policy Committee meeting for the Utah League of Cities and Towns. It is September 13th, 2021. My name is Dawn Ramsey, and I serve as First Vice President of the League and as Chair of the LPC, and I'm just grateful for all of you and your willingness to engage in this process and to serve. And the first thing on our agenda that we need to do is adopt the minutes from our August 16th, 2021 meeting. Those minutes have been sent out. Is there anyone who's had a chance to review those that would like to make a motion to approve them, or are there any amendments that you'd like to see made? Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Thank you so much. All right. Any discussion or concern about the minutes? I'm hoping somebody will let me know if someone online says there is. Okay. All right. Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes from our August 16th, 2021 meeting, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Those minutes are approved. Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to turn some time over to Cam, and we're just going to let him run with it. We've got quite a bit to cover, and I'll be back in a bit, but I'll turn this over to Cam and let you just go with it. All right, thanks, everyone. Is that yours?
Yep, that's mine. Okay, well, thank you, Mayor Ramsey, and thank you, everybody, both online and in person, for joining us today. As she said, we do have a packed agenda, and we're sorry we were a few minutes late getting started because of the AV issues, so we'll still try to wrap up by 1:30-ish. First, we have a few logistical things to hit before we jump into the update from the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission and the starting point for a proposal that we're looking for input on today. We're not looking for a vote because at this point it's not a bill. It is just a starting point for the discussions that the governor's office presented last week. Mayor Ramsey was on the Unified Economic, she represents the League on the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission and spoke up in the meeting, and then we've been working behind the scenes, and so we're looking for input on that starting point, and then we'll also walk through the process we've put in place to provide significant feedback. Then the business session of this meeting is around the two resolutions that we sent out to you in the LPC email last week, and then we'll have an ARPA update at the end, time permitting. By a quick show of hands, both, I guess just in the room, it'll be hard to do this online, but how many folks have had an opportunity to meet with their legislators during the summer? Okay, so just during the summer, raise your hands. So it looks like about a third of the people in the room. Online will follow up with you as well. The legislature took July and August off. It certainly didn't feel like that, but that was their intent. Do we stop?
Just put it in slideshow mode so they can see it better.
I'll let you put it in slideshow mode. Okay. While he's bringing that up, second thing second, Scott Darrington in particular, this is for you. I wore a blue tie for you today, and you'll see here in a moment. I mean, how can you not love Kalani Sitake, right? I knew we were in trouble the minute he caught that pass on the sideline, and I wish he was a receiver for us because that would have certainly helped. But anyway, kudos to BYU. You deserve to win. You dominated from start to finish, and what a huge weekend for BYU in the state of Utah. So kudos there. Scott, you're welcome for the blue tie. I couldn't bring myself to wear like BYU apparel, but I thought that this was magnanimous enough.
We'll take it.
Okay, perfect.
The first thing I noticed was that you were in blue.
Yeah.
The very first thing I noticed.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, how many people in the room were there? Yeah, it looked electric on TV, so good for you guys. Okay, other quick logistics things. Our LPC subgroups are underway. Some have already been meeting during the summer. A couple we just started a couple of weeks ago. For example, we've already met as a homeless group. We have another meeting coming up later this week. And so you can see who on League staff is on point on these different issues. So if you or your city want to be involved in any of these particular issues, please let us know. You can contact any League staffer, or you can contact the direct point person. Justin Lee is not here today because he had a previously scheduled Spartan race with his son this weekend prior to us hiring him, and so he's excused today, but he is running point on several of these issues. And then you can see who else is on these issues. So today's primary objective will be unified economic opportunity and those two resolutions. And as the proposals work their way through these different subgroups, we'll be bringing them back to LPC in the months to come. Any quick questions about the LPC subgroups? Perfect. Okay, we also, during this logistics time, wanted to thank everyone for participating in the LPC survey that we requested from you last month. We had over 100 responses from cities and towns across the state, and it was incredibly helpful. I'll use this, actually, Mayor Ramsey, to set up the UEOC. Before I do that, though, Roger, will you take a minute and just give a quick update on opioid litigation and what that means for cities and how we're coordinating with the municipal attorneys?
First of all, it's the first time in a year and a half I've been here in person. I'm not an avatar that lives on a computer, so. We held a meeting with about 80 people online last Friday, I believe it was, with the Attorney General's office and representatives from the counties. The opioid litigation has been going on for 4 or 5 years. And what has happened now is there is a settlement that's being proposed that, without going into the details, because we haven't seen all the details, if all the political subdivisions of the state of Utah and the state of Utah agree, there's several $1 million that will be allocated throughout the state. But the actual terms of the settlement, we still have not gotten a document from the Attorney General's office. What we met was to get input from the Attorney General about where they are in this particular process. At this juncture, we're awaiting the document that comes from the AG's office, at which point it will be disseminated. Every city and every county will have to sign off on it if we're going to get universal participation. The money only goes to entities that are above 10,000 in population or filed their own lawsuits. We have no cities that filed individual lawsuits. We had 29 counties that filed their individual lawsuits, so all 29 counties had separate attorneys at this meeting. But anyway, that's sort of a summary where we are. The amount of money, the process of development is still sort of up in the air. We're forming a group under the direction of the UMMA to look at the proposal, the final document, and be able to give recommendations back to you in your cities as to whether you adopt it or not. We're hopefully this is going to move fairly quickly. We hope to have a document to us. The AG's office says their goal is to have this wrapped up by the 1st of December, which means they've got to get something to us pretty quick. And so it's sort of in their hands. So anyway, that's a quick summary of about an hour meeting, but I think there's actually going to be a proposal that's going to come this time.
Perfect. Any questions for Roger on the opioid piece? I know there are a few of you who had your city attorneys or some city attorneys in this room who were on that call on Friday, but any other questions on this piece? Okay. Last thing on logistics, because we are taking votes today on the two resolutions, if you're in person, make sure you sign up in the back. Liam, will you raise your hand, Liam? So Liam will be monitoring the in-person LPC registration, so make sure you've signed up so you can cast your vote. For those of you online, Carson is dropping a Google spreadsheet into the chat box so that you can register individually as well so that we know what the count is. When we get to the resolutions, Roger will walk through the process for whether or not the LPC endorses the two resolutions before you today. So it's currently 12:20 in the room. We're hoping to close the timing for signing in at 12:30. So finish your lunch, make sure you sign in the back. Okay, Mayor Ramsey, I'll turn back to you for the events, and then we'll get underway into the substance.
Just wanted to re-invite you, put in a plug, beat this drum to death. We would really love to have you join us for our annual conference. It is going to be held downtown Salt Lake City. We have it at the Salt Palace, September 29th through October 1st. It's going to be an outstanding conference, and the Salt Palace is very large. We've got plenty of space, plenty of room, and that's been on purpose. We would really love to have you come and engage. Lots of good opportunities there, good information that I think is helpful for all of our cities and towns, regardless of your size. We have quite a bit to be offered at this conference, and we hope that you'll join us. It is not too late to sign up, and we'd love to see you there. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Ramsey. Okay, let's jump into the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission. Mayor Ramsey and I have spent a lot of time with this commission, and there's still plenty of meetings left to go this calendar year. Come on. The survey results from your LPC survey submissions have been very, very helpful over the last few weeks as we've been engaging with the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission, the Commission on Housing Affordability, and the Land Use Task Force. We asked you more than 40 different items in the growth space, and as a reminder, there were over 100 items that have come up in these different commission meetings, and we narrowed it down to 40. Even since then, there have been 4 or 5 new ideas that have come up just in the last 3 weeks. So we'll likely be bringing those back to you at different times. I've tried to highlight the Magnificent 7 from the survey results because I think they help illustrate where you as members are on these topics. So generally speaking, there was support for expansion of HTRZ concepts. That's the Housing and Transit Redevelopment Zone that the legislature enacted with our support last year. No city has yet implemented one, but the concepts within the HTRZ have a lot of support within local government. Whether or not there will be expansion is still up in the air. This has come up in a couple of meetings just in the last week or two, but I think there's some opportunity there to pursue. The second is the last thing I'll mention on the HTRZ piece. There's overlap here with current CRA law as well. We've heard loud and clear, both in the survey and anecdotally, frustrations of dealing with other taxing entities when you're trying to move forward CRA projects, particularly CRA projects that have housing, and the pushback you're getting from other taxing entities. We've also heard from other local taxing entities their concern about the legislature requiring them to participate in project areas, which was one of the key components of the HTRZ, but the HTRZ also had certain thresholds that you have to meet as a city. So a lot of dialogue happening there. Number 2, support for better short-term rental enforcement tools. I've had this conversation with multiple legislators over the last few months, and we have our subgroup actively working on some potential recommendations there. Number 3, this dovetails with number 1, but is also a key component of the governor's starting point on local retail incentives. And that is that the survey results demonstrated support for state incentives for more mixed use and residential development near transit and in commercial areas. There was not support for mandates around more mixed use and residential development in commercial areas, but there was significant support for incentives related to that type of land use. I use the term split perspectives because there were some that were very supportive of this, some that raised concerns about how to incorporate local land use into state economic development strategies. We'll talk about that in a moment. There are also split perspectives about eliminating retail incentives or reconfiguring retail incentives, particularly how they fit within mixed use. And that's also a core foundation of the governor's current proposal. And then there was major concern about changes to the 50/50 sales tax formula, major concerns about changes to the motor fuel tax, and major concerns about housing quotas or ending single-family housing or single-family zoning. With an interesting caveat, the survey also showed that there was less opposition toward incentives around allowing for more types of housing in single-family zones. So again, the incentive side versus the mandate side. So really interesting survey results there. So again, thank you for your participation in that survey. We're using that as a living document as we're engaged in these deliberations really on a daily basis. The last thing I'll mention too is California just ended single-family zoning. Now, I would ask for a show of hands of how many people want Utah to be California, but I already know that nobody's going to raise their hands. Nevertheless, California is just the latest state around the country to entertain state mandates to end single-family zoning or to really overhaul the practice of local government zoning. So we wanted to make you aware that they just did that. They had a couple of other bills as well, one of which would mandate different types of housing near transit, and another would mandate housing in commercial areas. So you can see a lot of the conversations we're having here, California is a little ahead of us, as well as some other states around the country. We mentioned these to you before, but this is what the ULCT board endorsed. These are the key questions that we've been using as principles, and that we bring up, and Mayor Ramsey can attest to this, we bring this up in every subgroup meeting. What are we trying to accomplish here? And if we're trying to accomplish goals such as reducing housing prices and smart growth policies, are we pulling policy levers that will actually get to those goals while still respecting the role of cities and balancing the quality of life of today's and tomorrow's residents? Again, as a quick reminder of where those commissions are, what is highlighted in orange are the different policy topics that have come up. What's highlighted in red is what we are going to ask you about here for the next few minutes. And it's really this question about how should, and if so, how local governments incentivize retail. You can see there are other topics up here. We're not going to go into these in great detail today, but if you have questions, let us know. Whoops, come on back. Okay, so last week at the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission meeting that the governor co-chairs, his team from the Office of Economic Opportunity presented this concept as a starting point. And just so everyone's on the same page, the Speaker of the House has expressed his support for this as a starting point, and other members of the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission expressed support for this as a starting point. The reason I keep emphasizing starting point is that they recognize that there were a lot of stakeholders that needed to weigh in, and so they wanted to get the dialogue going, and they're looking for feedback from the league on October 5th at their next meeting, okay? So I'll read this for those of you who might not be able to see it, but the starting point is that tax rebates or offsets for any tax revenue stream that is existing or will be generated is not allowed as a subsidy, incentive, infrastructure support, or enticement for retail businesses. So this language would be put into state law and would change how cities and counties utilize tax rebates, offsets, or other sort of revenue stream to incentivize retail exclusively. As part of our dialogue over the last few weeks, we have raised concerns around the sweeping language herein potentially having some negative consequences on local governments across the state. So different exceptions that were not presented at the UEOC meeting last week, but we've brought up as worthy reasons to consider potential exceptions or changes to this starting point include counties off the Wasatch Front, census tracts with low area median income. This, for example, could encompass food deserts that exist in certain low-income areas around the state, particularly in some of our older cities. Mixed-use developments that have a certain threshold of housing or other commercial uses and what that would look like, and then environmentally contaminated areas. We've heard from several cities that have used retail incentives to help redevelop contaminated areas, and that's been a useful tool. I mentioned that they're looking for feedback from us by Tuesday, October 5th. We asked some questions in the LPC survey around these concepts, so that's where we've been starting from. We've contracted with Lewis Young to provide us with data and analysis. We've convened a group of attorneys and managers and economic development professionals that has met a couple of times already. We'll meet again later this week, and we're coordinating with the RDA Association as well. So what we are looking for from this group today, and you can type into the chat box, which it looks like some have, but it looks like none of that's on this topic yet. But you can type in the chat box if you have some questions, or for those of you in the room, what questions do you have about the current starting point, and what other things do you want our subgroup to consider here as we're working on this starting point over the next couple of weeks? Carson, I'll let you watch the chat room and alert me if anybody comes there, and I'm surveying the room. Mayor Ramsey, come on up while we wait for questions.
Thanks. I just want to make a point of emphasis. You know, as we look at this and go, this is a completely different model. This is a totally different model than how things are done. And I'm positive we're going to get a lot of feedback of great concern. We anticipate that. We're aware of that. I just feel like it's going to be important to mention that either the 50-50 is going to be changed or this is going to happen. And I think we have a 0% chance of getting both of those taken off the table. I think there's a chance both of them could happen. However, the best chance we have to try to take changing the 50-50 distribution formula off the table, which we have data from cities and towns of all different sizes across the state. We've got a lot of data that shows that the very strong majority, with very few exceptions of cities, would be hurt by changing the 50-50 formula. There are a few that it would potentially end up a little bit better for, but very few, and in the big picture, nearly all would be benefited, regardless of the size of your community, are benefited by the 50-50 formula the way it is, with so many people shopping online. So I just wanted to be clear, if we come back and all of our input is, we hate this, take this off the table, nothing about this is good, we don't want to eliminate the opportunity completely to do incentives. If that's what we take back, then what will be pushed forward, and I think maybe even out of our hands really, is other things that we may dislike more. So just to be clear, we're working as hard as possible to try to make this the best it can be and the least negatively impactful to all of our communities. So if you give that feedback just with the perspective, we got to figure out how to work with this, because it's very unlikely that we can eliminate it. So with that, just please keep that in mind, because that's the reality we're against.
Gary, before I call on you, let me add one last piece here. The governor is in the process of overhauling the state's economic development strategy. So I also want to make it clear that this concept, and I'll bring it back on the screen so people can see it here. This concept is not happening in a vacuum. The governor has been very clear with his own team that he wants to curtail incentives that the state uses to promote economic development. So they're in the process right now of overhauling the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity and totally changing EdTIF and changing state incentives. So this is a piece of that broader conversation. So this isn't just, let's take it out on cities here. This is part of the governor's overall effort to change economic development strategy, for which he has support of House leadership. Senate leadership's been a little more coy. We're meeting with them next week to get a better sense of where they're at. Gary?
Gary Hill, Bountiful City. Cam, I'm assuming this is working online? Okay, good. Is there any appetite or recognition of allowing incentives for retail in areas where there's already sufficient housing, or an abundance of housing, or say a lack of retail opportunities to support the housing?
That's something that we have brought up. Bountiful is not the example of that type of city, but I can think of another city that is. So I see Paul and the mayor here, so let's use Eagle Mountain as an example, right? So Eagle Mountain, my in-laws live in my sister-in-law lives in Eagle Mountain, and you have a bunch of housing and you don't really have much of a commercial sector. So this language, without any exceptions, would basically say to Eagle Mountain, you cannot incentivize retail. Eventually, retail and other commercial will follow the rooftops, but how that is actually going to happen in practice is a great unknown. So I think that is a topic worth pursuing. It's something we have brought up. When I brought this up at a meeting last week, the response back from a member of House leadership was, maybe I'd be open to that type of city, like an Eagle Mountain, being able to incentivize infrastructure, but not directly incentivize a store or a business, but maybe the infrastructure, but would still like to see it as a mixed use with housing attached to it, even though there's other housing already there.
And just a follow-up question, if the prevailing feeling is that retail will always follow rooftops, then do they see the irony in wanting to automatically rezone properties that we are holding aside for future retail? If they won't let us incentivize and they won't let us wait, then what is our opportunity?
Right. So this, This language doesn't get to the planning side. So in the example I was just giving with Eagle Mountain in their city center could still plan for commercial uses, and you could still hold that land aside for commercial uses. The question would be, would you be able to dedicate revenue specifically for either the retail business or for the infrastructure that would support it? And so it's not part of the potential exceptions yet, but we've talked internally about this distinction between the direct subsidy to Gary business and investing in the infrastructure to allow for the economic activity to blossom. So that's not on the exceptions piece yet, but that is something we've been discussing.
I would like to interject an option or something that we should consider. And this is along the same line of what Gary was talking about as more of an established city versus Eagle Mountain, Saratoga Springs. If we looked at the percentage of the city that is developed, and if we put and said something, hey, if your city is less than 60% developed, you still have the ability to hold out land zoned commercial so that you can shape your future. Unfortunately, everyone says mixed use, and they think it's a noble concept that's going to work in every scenario. For us in the fast growing communities, mixed use is a ton of housing and we'll throw a Maverick on the corner. That is not mixed use. And the type of density that supports the mixed use that everyone gets giddy about.
Oh, by the way, Gateway was mixed use. How's that going for us right now? The mixed use density concept does not work where land values are cheap and the economics do not support it. And so fundamentally, this is a one-size-fits-all approach, and so we can't take away the valuable tools that we as cities need to have. We have to be able to hold land for a future commercial. We have to be able to try and incentivize and get those businesses to come into green territories where the economics don't necessarily support them coming. Yet our residents are being bogged down because we're lugging the roads up going to the other communities that have those types of retail components in them. So we have to consider that the development is an evolutionary process, and we've got to be able to have those tools for those right environments. So I would suggest the tool, if you're less than 50%, if you're less than 60% developed, we should be able to maintain those tools and use those tools to incentivize and bring businesses where they should be, so that we can create our commercial pools, so that we can create our downtowns, so that those downtowns can become the thriving parts of our communities. And instead, we're being told, you cannot develop that, you cannot create that sense of identity or place. Look at all the planning people that you bring in as our keynote speakers. They're always talking about creating a sense of place. And if we cannot use tools to create a sense of place, all we will have is more urban sprawl. And how's that working out for Los Angeles and those other communities in California?
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. For those online, Carson summarizing what Mark just said. And Carson, you're getting it. Let's also, Carson, make sure we make a note of that concept of the 50, 60, or the threshold of where the community is in its life cycle. Before I take any other questions in the room, let me quickly hit the questions that have popped up online. So let's see here. Okay, so Councilmember Ellsworth asked about providing incentives for grocery, retail, and food deserts. So, Councilmember, this is the point I was making on the census tract piece. We brought up the food desert in several cities. You and I talked over the weekend about the food desert in Provo. So we have brought that point up. Some of the pushback we've been getting from it is whether or not incentivizing the food desert or incentivizing a grocery store to fill the food desert would actually make dollars and cents work for the grocery store to come there long term, or if they would just be there for a short period of time. So, but we have brought that issue up. Several other cities have raised it. Tim Tingy from Conwood Heights. At a minimum, we need to build in the exceptions. One size does not fit all. Right, that's why we've been bringing the different exceptions up. We have Carson, thank you there. Okay, Paul from Brigham. Do the legislators know what they mean by no incentives for retail? So that was this language. They look at incentives as including infrastructure support. We've tried to distinguish between the incentives for a direct investment in a business or a rebate to a business versus the investment in the infrastructure on the ground. We also, at the meeting Mayor Ramsey and I attended last week, there was a lot of back and forth over the definition of retail. And at this point, the starting point proposal encompasses everything that has a retail sales tax code. And so that would include hospitality and lodging, as well as your traditionally what you think of as retail, like a store or a car dealership and the like. Rob W., which I assume is Rob Wall, if could work if housing in areas other than the on-site commercial and affected area. Yep, that's good feedback. So we'll make sure we get that concept as well. Craig Smith, one size never fits all. Brick and mortar retail is struggling. Yeah, so the walkable communities piece, I think this dovetails to a degree with what Mark was saying earlier. Can Gary speak into a mic? Yep, okay, looks like these are all repeat. Okay, and then looks like Rob Wall has added the threshold of housing piece again there. Okay, Mayor Shepherd, would this affect only cities? Would it apply to MIDA? Yeah, Mayor, that's an excellent question. At this point, MIDA and Point of the Mountain have not come up, but that's an excellent point. If it applies to one, it applies to all. Based on where the governor's trying to go with the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity and changing EdTIF, I would assume this would apply across the board, cities, counties, and other political subdivisions. Okay, all right, I think I got everything online. Oh, then those are all the ayes that are no longer necessary. Okay, other thoughts? Liam? Yeah, Paul?
I've been told that this is very soft, so I'm gonna try to talk loud. Hopefully it's coming through, but Paul Jerome from Eagle Mountain. One of the things that, you know, in conjunction with what Mark was saying, that we do, or we're trying to do in Eagle Mountain, is incentivizing the first of their kind sort of mentality. So, you know, first grocery store, first gas station, first whatever, fill in the blank. And it doesn't, with a city the size of Eagle Mountain, we're 20% built out. We believe we're about 50,000 people. We have no real downtown, like you were saying. So even geographically, that first of its kind mentality might be something you might want to have attached to a geographical area. So you have that same thing that Mark was talking about, the support for the residents in a certain area that they can reach, you know, easily. So that's another idea I'd like to offer up. Is just, you know, don't totally wipe it out, but is there a way we can do the first of its kind? You know, get things started, reserve the space, like Gary was talking about, where, you know, if not, like for Eagle Mountain, you're going to end up having just houses.
Right.
We're going to reach 200,000 people with just homes and nowhere to shop.
Yep, and one road in and out of town.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep, no, that's a great point, Paul. I'll summarize. Oh, perfect. Carson put it in there for the chat room. And actually, this is a perfect segue to the point that Mayor Ramsey was making earlier about the 50-50. When this commission first met a couple of months ago, what they initially put on the table was change the local 1% sales tax formula, and we talked about this at LPC a month ago. We did some analysis over the summer, which we presented to the commission 3 weeks ago now, where we demonstrated if you were to change from 50-50 to 100% population, you don't change the actual pot of money, you just reallocate what's in the pot of money. And so you'd have some cities that would benefit, some cities that would not benefit. But if one of the objectives was to facilitate the development of more housing, it actually, changing the distribution formula doesn't actually get to that outcome, but instead would leave budgetary destruction in its wake for a lot of communities, though it would also benefit some others. Then you throw in the changes with people shopping from home, and that's another complication. Justin Lee and I met with the Speaker of the House a couple of weeks ago to bring this same data set to him. His comment to us was that he still thought that was the best lever to pull, but he was open to doing a deeper dive in the data, and so we've got a request into, as he put it, roll up the sleeves and go almost city by city in the data and to understand what it would mean if it switched to 100% population. And Paul, they often use Eagle Mountain or similar cities as the example that you should get more sales tax because you have all of those housing units. And then there's some frustration that Eagle Mountain, I'm just using you because I could pick on Mark, but I always pick on Mark, so it's actually kind of nice to pick on someone else. But Eagle Mountain could plan for these commercial uses, and because you're holding that land for commercial uses, that's land that's not going to housing and exacerbating the housing shortage. our response back to them consistently, and Mayor Ramsey has said this in meetings too, has been those residents of Eagle Mountain, even if there was no sales tax at all, those residents still want somewhere to shop and go to work and have access to amenities so they don't have to drive 20 miles or 20 minutes to get somewhere. Tanya, I'll pick on you since you're in the same row as Eagle Mountain here, but this has come up quite a bit in the context of West Jordan and development along U111, and it's really in all the communities that are that are blowing up with growth right now, but for which the commercial development is still a step or two behind. So that is a key friction point right now. Okay, let me quickly check online here. Paul Larson, you asked about the facade grant in a downtown area. Yeah, this is a great point that actually hasn't come up yet at all. So we'll make sure to make a point on this one as well, because this gets to placemaking. So thank you, Paul. Last one online here is Matt. What evidence exists that housing affordability will improve if this policy is implemented? Okay, so we are, and Mayor Fulmer is asking about the transportation network, so it's similar to the points that Paul was just making. So we are framing every policy question here with what is the outcome we're trying to accomplish here. The governor is overhauling the state's economic development strategy. Housing is a piece of that, but it's not necessarily the driver to what the governor wants to accomplish with changing how we do economic development in the state. Okay? When he and other state leaders are looking at local retail incentives, they see a link with housing, but it's really more about how are we investing public dollars in economic development, and are we maximizing the return on investment, and is there a better way to do it? So that's where they're starting from. Where housing comes into it is it dovetails in the discussions we're having around housing policy, around density, around where the housing units are located. So it's connected, but the initial effort to change retail incentives really is driven by that higher level objective of changing economic development in Utah. And for example, the ed TIF is being overhauled dramatically. So it's not just us and the retail incentives, it's part of that bigger picture. Liam, I saw you had a hand. Hold on, Mark. Let's go over here. Hiskey? Okay.
What I was asking was, I heard that the objection is that cities are holding certain properties for just retail. And the desire is to be able to change that through a lens of allowing housing. Now, if in fact that comes as the state taketh away the retail option, will the state or the private sector step up to also address the issue of affordable housing?
Right.
If we are forced to make such a move, would then the private sector assure there's 10% or whatever percent of those houses are affordable, or would the state step up for that? That's just a question.
No, that's a great point. So, Carson put one piece in, and then the second piece is what's the role of the private sector in addressing affordable housing, particularly if there are state efforts to change the way we conduct the business at the local level. The assumption is that cities are holding land for retail that could otherwise be developed as housing, and there's not as much demand for retail because of the shift to online sales. We presented data at the meeting I referenced 3 weeks ago, where we actually demonstrated to the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission the retail vacancy rates in Salt Lake County. And you get to the southwest part of Salt Lake County, the vacancy rates were 2.8%, whereas the vacancy rates countywide were 7%. So we presented that data point to show that in the fast-growing parts of the county, your vacancy rates are so low, they might as well not be vacancy rates. So there's sufficient demand for additional commercial development there for which cities are planning. And that if the cities were not allowed to plan for that type of development, all of those folks are going to have to go to work and go shopping and go find those amenities somewhere else, which then adds to air quality challenges and transportation gridlock and the like. So then they came back and said, well, what about the older cities that are not allowing for redevelopment of older strip malls and older commercial centers and are not allowing for housing to be a component of that? And they gave several examples. So that's been an example of the back and forth here, where we're trying to have the conversation about redeveloping cities as well as new growth cities. Your second point about the private sector stepping in on true affordability and affordable housing, we've been having deliberations around inclusionary zoning. At this point, within the land use task force, there's not much appetite from either the city side or the development side to have a state mandate for inclusionary zoning. We have a couple of communities that have mandates now, so we're trying to figure out what it looks like for them going forward. One intriguing thing about the HTRZ concept is the HTRZ concept does require moderate income housing to be built as part of the project. So it's interesting that our survey results showed a lot of support from league members for the HTRZ concept, which includes the actual development of moderate income housing, 80% AMI and below, as part of that development near Front Runner. So, John, I think that may be an area to help thread the needle here is balancing, which location makes sense there. So we do need to get to the resolutions in a moment. Let me check online, see if I missed anything, and then Mark, we'll go to you. So Councilmember Clint Morris, talking about phasing it in since commercial traditionally lags behind. The question here of timing and when all of this would go into effect is an important one. In fact, when we met with the speaker a couple of weeks ago, and he said he still thought changing the 50-50 was the best approach, he acknowledged that you couldn't do that overnight. There would need to be some sort of phase-in since cities had made decisions based on the 50-50. Again, at this point, he's not saying he's opening a bill file. He still thinks that's the best approach, but wants to go through the data with us in more detail. Meanwhile, the governor is very supportive of curtailing incentives, and we're looking at this saying, okay, is there a way to reconfigure this approach to meet the different goals that we have as cities? Cliff from Provo, there's a difference between attracting big corporations from outside and local service type businesses. Yep, agreed, and I think that's, the governor's office has really been focused on the big corporations, and they're actually trying to make the pivot to focusing more on helping local companies succeed. And then, Highland Mayor Rodman, support the current 50-50 and the disruption that negatively impacted cities would face is not worth the benefit. Yep, that was part of the point that we were making is you could disrupt every budget in the state but not actually get the outcome that you're seeking. Mark.
So Cam, one last question / statement / cynical comment. With the exception of the state trying to take revenues from us and force more housing onto us, what meaningful plans or proposals does the state have going forward to using their own dollars to subsidize housing and increase housing? Because again, the speaker and others seem to want us to incentivize housing without the state actually having their economic engines doing that. If the state is so serious about this, what meaningful financial commitments besides our dollars are they dedicating to incentivizing housing statewide?
I am looking up in my phone right now. I actually had someone from the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget send me some data just a little bit ago, breaking down that very question, both on housing and homelessness, of what the state investment has been and what the state ARPA investment has been. And of course, I can't pull it up, but I will find it. I hesitate to use a number off the top of my head, but the point that the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget made to us that day, and I'll look for it as we move on here, because I know where it is on my computer, but we're using the computer for the presentation, was that they had dedicated tens of millions of dollars in recent years, and with ARPA, they were dedicating a significant amount of ARPA funding toward both homelessness and housing. So they then flipped it back on us and said, we're willing to put this money in for housing rehabilitation, for homelessness intervention and the like, but we need to see the city land use adjust accordingly. My response back was, each of the last 3 years, we've set records for the number of new permitted units, and we're ahead of that pace this year. So that does demonstrate that cities are accommodating housing, and the majority of that the last few years has been multifamily housing. Now, then the conversation gets even more nuanced. And I'm not going to use any specific city names in this context, but it's been interesting to see how they've shifted just this summer between saying, we acknowledge that there are cities like Carson City that are doing their share and the data shows it and they're planning for a variety of housing types, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have Rogers City, where in the last couple of years, they accepted SB 34, but they have not done anything meaningful to actually implement SB 34. And then as we've met with DWS, and we've talked to DWS about SB 34 implementation, you can see a trend with a handful of cities that have said, okay, we comply with SB 34, but they haven't passed any sort of ordinance that would allow for the that would facilitate more housing variety in the city. And there are a couple of cities in northern Utah where they've actually gone the opposite. They complied with SB 34 the first year, and now they've since rezoned large portions of their city to only allow for large lots. And you have people running for office this year on anti-growth platforms, et cetera, et cetera. So I spent Thursday, Friday, Saturday an event with several legislators, and we were talking about housing basically at every break, and then spent several hours one night talking housing. And the question they kept asking me is, what are we going to do about Rogers City to force Rogers City to be a responsible city, but not hurt Carson City, who we feel like is doing a pretty good job of trying to balance these needs? We need the league to answer that dilemma for us. Okay, on that happy note, any other questions in the room before we pivot to resolutions? Okay, then let me sum with kind of reading the room here, masks or otherwise. There's significant concern with the starting point of where it's at. There have been several different ideas that have come up in this meeting that we've been recording that we'll take back to our work group and coordinating with the RDA Association and others as we continue to put meat on the bones here and provide additional context to this starting point proposal. At this point, we don't have an LPC scheduled before October 5th, but we do have a league board meeting that will occur as part of the league conference later this month. So our internal goal has been to work through these concepts, gather feedback, and then take some additional concepts back to the league board on September 29th to allow us to continue that conversation the week after the board meeting at the UEOC Commission. Final thoughts? Going once? Going twice? Okay. In that case, Mayor Ramsey, I'm going to turn over to John Park to present the Love, Listen, Lead resolution on behalf of the task force. For those in person, make sure you signed in. For those online, make sure you've signed in. John will present the process. So John, it's 1 o'clock. Rogers parliamentarian, as you guys come up. Yep, I'm bringing up the slide here. So I'll let Roger, as parliamentarian, explain, and then I'll bring the, oops, wrong way. And then I'll bring the resolution back up on the board.
We're shifting now. This is in effect a public hearing of the Rules Committee of the league, which is what the LPC is now. The bylaws require that we basically have a meeting to discuss all proposed resolutions. And if they're going to move forward, this is a meeting or the scheduled meeting for that purpose. We have two resolutions. The first will be from John talking about policing, et cetera. And the second one come from, I'm not sure who's carrying that one. For it to move forward, this will need to get a 2/3 vote to send it to the business session. You can amend any of these resolutions, that's a simple majority, but let you know. Now, we can schedule an additional Rules Committee meeting if we wish to, but this is the one that's scheduled for the moment. So that's this purpose right now, is to receive input. It need to be changed, and at least on this first resolution, the goal is to move it forward to the full body in October.
No, you're good. I'm just, you talk.
Okay.
I'll pull it up so people can see it, and we'll shoot to see if we can do this in about 10 minutes, and then have time for the end.
Great, thank you. I just want to point out that I think our executive director was very magnanimous to wear a blue tie today. I just, for the record, like to point out mine is black. Shortly after some of the riots we had in various municipalities in the state and the George Floyd incident, well, they were based on the George Floyd incident. We started a task force It's the Loveless and Lead Task Force. It's made up of in conjunction with the Utah Chiefs of Police Association. So we have police chiefs on it, we have city managers, elected officials, city attorneys, and Cameron and myself on this task force. This task force, one of the first things we did is we created we wanted to make factual-based decisions. We created a survey in conjunction with Y2 Analytics, and part of that went out. We have focus groups with everyone from part of the BIPOC community and the Fraternal Order of Police and everyone in between. We took data we heard from various other groups working on some of these issues, and we formulated this wonderful in-depth survey that we held. Based on that survey, we found out various things. We've gone through that survey at a couple of league meetings now, but we found that there are trust gaps that do exist, and of course we've discussed it in our Loveless and Lead Task Force, and a part of what we've done is we've come up with this resolution. This resolution does several things. First of all, what it does is it acknowledges the work of the Loveless and Lead Task Force. It does show right at the beginning, it says, whereas Utah League of Cities and Towns acknowledges and expresses gratitude toward peace officers and their family for their public safety and community service, whereas the Utah League of Cities and Towns acknowledges that the law enforcement profession is fraught with risk, physical and mental, emotional, and financial, and that society, through the enactment of laws, has empowered law enforcement officers to act on their behalf to ensure, where possible, the safety, welfare, and protection of the civil rights of others. This resolution also acknowledges a couple things legislative that have been done. First of all, that we worked on a couple of bills with Senator Iwamoto that passed our legislature that dealt with our ability to keep track of officers that are under investigation and might jump from municipality to municipality. And part of that was also that we came up with immunity clause that said that we could have those discussions about police officers. It also acknowledges several of the legislative efforts that we went through to support our police officers, that the many bills that went from everything from additional training for canines to additional training for all of our officers that include mental health, crisis intervention, response, arrest control, and de-escalation. It also talks about the way that we worked and tried to weave in between the various state and local legislative sessions and federal congressional sessions, and of course that's ongoing and will continue to ongo in the state of Utah. So what this does, it resolves several things. You've been sent the copy of this, and I could briefly go through some of these, but it's most importantly that we should continue to strive to foster communities in which every member feels safe, supported, and respected. We do recognize that there's a trust gap that was pointed out as far as our Y2 analytics survey, and that yes, there are things that can be done to address that, but there's some pretty straightforward things that will resolve. It ends up saying that Utah cities and towns will oppose legislative and policy efforts that preclude the ability of police departments to respond responsibly to a public safety or medical crisis. Utah cities and towns will oppose legislative and policy efforts that unduly restrict the personal privacy or due process of peace officers, which gets back to the recent rulings on Garrity that has taken place at our records committee in the state level. And it also says Utah cities and towns will oppose legislative efforts and policy efforts that result in unfunded mandates or unsustainable financial burdens on municipalities and communities without significant benefits. This resolution was first presented to the LLL task force. Then we created a subcommittee to refine it. Some great work was done in that subcommittee. It was brought before you at LPC briefly last month, and then we sent each of you a copy. I did receive one comment on that, and then we sent it out to you again as part of this agenda. Are there any questions before we turn it over to Mayor Ramsey?
It's not about that.
Where's your chapter?
course, answered that one. Okay. So the personal privacy or due. To a degree, this is.
It says in the very last, the question is, should the resolution also state that ULCT will support efforts to not restrict personal privacy and/or due process? And I kind of think we point that out where it says the Utah cities and towns will oppose legislative and policy efforts that unduly restrict the personal privacy or due process of peace officers. Do they want that a little more definitive, or?
Yeah, maybe beyond police officers to the general public.
Oh. Okay, that was the question, is whether we should expand this to the general public. I think that our work is mainly with peace officers, but duly noted.
Can I address that piece real quick?
Yep, sure. That's from Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, for the question. For those in the room, Rob's pointing out we don't want to approve something that will oppose the legislative effort we plan. What we realized a few months ago was that we as a league did not really have a policy platform around public safety. The last resolution of any sort on public safety was almost a decade ago, and it was just a couple of lines. So as a result, we sat down with the task force a few months ago and said, we think in light of everything that happened last year, in light of all these other issues that are coming this year, it would be worthwhile to set a policy foundation for the organization on public safety. The task force unanimously agreed, and we went through multiple drafts. So this resolution is much broader than most resolutions. It's 4 pages
long, yeah.
But we basically went topic by topic and said, okay, with this topic, do we have a principle within this resolution that will help guide us? Because let's say John retires at some point. Let's say I retire at some point. Do we have a policy platform in place to help guide the league on all of these public safety pieces? So Rob, your point is a good one, and we've thought through that. Councilmember Ivey from Washington has a question on law enforcement weighing in.
As law enforcement waded in, as I mentioned, this effort was part of the Utah Chiefs of Police Association. We've also took into consideration the Fraternal Order of Police on this, and mentioned it briefly in LELC, which is the Law Enforcement Legislative Committee. And so I think that the question was, has law enforcement weighed in? And I think that not only have they waded in many cases, they are the starting point of what we're trying to accomplish. And Rob Wall did say, thank you, looks good. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, got a couple yes votes.
No, that was from earlier.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
perfect. I like yes votes. Okay,
Okay,
Questions?
hold on. Sorry if this is, did we miss a question? Oh, that's still 110. Whoops. No, that's 110 now.
yeah.
So what did he,
Someone moved to pass, made a motion. That's for Dawn.
no, so sorry if this is a repeat, so that's always, but, okay, yep. So I guess, Mayor Ramsey, we're ready for you.
And
Oh,
on.
okay, yeah, here's the question. So can I take this one?
Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
So Councilmember Wharton asked, from Salt Lake, asked what non-law enforcement groups have weighed in. So for purposes of league policy comes from league members. So this resolution, this resolution came from our task force. We have not asked for other community groups to weigh in on it because it's league policy. But over the course of the last year and a half, we have been meeting regularly with different community stakeholder groups. Again, the Y2 survey work included focus groups that were specifically with men who are people of color, women who are people of color, talk about their experiences with law enforcement, as well as focus groups with police officers about their experiences. So over the course of the year and a half and building the survey and sharing what we've learned, we've tried to be as collaborative and consensus building as possible for purposes of the resolution itself, that it's set by league members. Okay. Mayor Ramsey, we do have a motion in the chat room. Was there, you mentioned, John?
No, I didn't.
You mentioned that somebody had brought you a minor tweak.
No, they just ask about, no, they just asked a question about it.
Oh.
That's
So it wasn't
only
an
got
actual
one
motion
com-
to amend.
My point was we've only had one comment since our last meeting.
Okay. And then Councilmember Wharton asked, what about LGBTQ groups who've been traditionally underserved or targeted by law enforcement? Do you want to mention this one?
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah.
we actually had this very conversation at our last meeting.
We had this very conversation at our task force meeting, and why it's an appropriate point to bring up right now, and probably an appropriate point to address eventually. We were trying to make these decisions based on the facts that we collected, and we did not collect it. Maybe we should have, maybe we shouldn't have, but at the time, most of all of the information we collected was based on age, gender, and color, ethnicity kind of information, and we don't have facts to back that, and we didn't think it was appropriate to add other groups, any other kind of groups, even though it's something that perhaps we should address. Yeah, the Y2 data did not address that, and we didn't feel as a Loveless and Lee task force that we should address anything like that without that kind of data.
So Councilmember Wharton asked if the resolution could be delayed until that data is collected. The Y2 data was a multi-month process, nearly $100,000 of investment. So we would have to essentially rebuild that type of work and have a different data set. So certainly if the resolutions committee wants to delay, that's up to you. We feel like this policy resolution does set a good foundation for our upcoming advocacy efforts in public safety based on the data we've collected. So Mayor Ramsey, I'll turn it to you. You've got a motion to support from Tim Tingy, who participates in the Loveless and Lee Task Force. Oh, yeah. Will you just read that? Because I think that helps.
Yes, in response to Councilmember Wharton's question, H, on the, toward the end of the things that the league will propose, says policy proposals that respect the due process of the general public. Well, that is something that it says we will support, right? And so that general public would be a catch-all for everyone. That would be our intention for that.
Okay, so we have a motion to support, and then we just need a second.
Who's the motion from?
Tim Tingy, Conrad Heights.
Okay, this is such an interesting process. Being here in person, I can't see the laptop. I don't know who's joining us electronically, so shout out to all of you. I don't even know who's on. So thanks for bearing with us as we try to work this out. And thanks to Roger for making sure we still get everything right. Appreciate
We have a
it.
second from Rod Mann,
Okay, we have a motion
from Tim Tingy.
from Tim Tingy and a second by Rod Mann to approve.
Okay, and how many on
Okay,
that?
to approve Resolution 2021-001, Community Trust in Public Safety from our Love, Listen, Lead Task Force. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion in person? Okay, is there any additional discussion online?
Okay. Matt Jensen from Pleasant Grove, please instruct online voters to place a 1 on the vote they want to make. So Carson, that's correct? That's consistent with what you've been saying?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay, and then you can read that.
And we have Councilmember Wharton said, I think it's important to recognize marginalized and targeted groups specifically.
Yeah. So council member, again, we talked about this at the Love, Listen, Lead Task Force just this last meeting. So we had a council member from Cache Valley who was making these very same points. And as we went back and forth in that task force meeting, it really came back to, we were basing this resolution on the Y2 data. And since the Y2 data was silent on LGBTQ issues, we were uncomfortable moving forward beyond what the Y2 data was focused on. So that's in part why we inserted several lines that were kind of the catch-all lines. So it would be bigger than what we had collected the data on.
It's a 2/3 vote.
2/3 vote, and how many you said?
We need 33 people,
Okay, 32.
33 to 49.
Okay. So Carson's tracking online, and then.
Okay. I will call for a vote. If you're here in person, please give an audible vote and a wave, and online. If your vote is yes, please put a 1 online, right? Okay. All in favor of supporting this and approving Resolution 2021-001, Community Trust in Public Safety from our Love, Listen, Lead Task Force, please say aye and raise your hand. We need to count, and we will have Carson counting online. If you're joining us electronically, please respond in the chat with a 1. Thank you.
How many do we have online?
While those votes are being tabulated, I just want to thank John and Cam and everyone from all of your cities, all of those who participated in this, our police chiefs and our city managers and everyone who's been a part of this process over the last year and a half. It's a great deal of work has gone into this, and I'm grateful for all those who were willing to come be part of the focus groups and to give their feedback and to help give a broad understanding that helped to drive this resolution on behalf of the league. Appreciate all the input.
So we're at 45, so it still asks for a motion for those who are in opposition.
We've had a couple more sign-ins since that's, we're at 32 online.
Okay, now any opposed, if you're in person, please raise your hand. And if you're online, please type the number 2.
Online, people, there's a call per no, so they can just type a 1 in the no box.
Okay, type a 1 in the no box. I can't see what you're looking at. So forget the number 2, type a 1 in the no box if you're a no online, and if you're a no in person, please raise your hand.
Any no's here in the room?
I think we're good.
Just so you'll know, I'm counting a fraction of a person to the next whole person. So if you have 32.1, I'm saying you gotta have 33 votes. So we'll have it comes up.
Okay. I think we're good. We can move on to the next resolution.
We have those collected? And I think that passes. Yes, that does pass by more than 2/3 majority, which is the threshold that need to be met with this. So thank you for participating. We're going to move on. Cam, are you the one presenting the next one? Lynn Pace. Lynn, we appreciate that. Lynn's going to discuss Resolution 2021-002, our growth and water resources, which is amendment to Resolution 2017-001. Lynn, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I be heard? Is that good? I'm not quite sure how I ended up presenting on this, but I'm happy to explain the concept that's at issue. A number of years ago, as the state began to increase its activity in special project entities, the league became concerned about how far that reach might go. And when I talk about special project entities, we started out with MIDA, then the Inland Port, then the Point of the Mountain Commission, perhaps the Utah Lake Commission, and others where the state has a great idea and they want to create a special purpose entity that might capture certain authority set forth in the statute and redirect that authority toward this state enterprise. So the resolution that was passed back in 2017 said we're happy, willing, ready, eager to partner with the state on these special projects as long as the state doesn't infringe on, 1, our land use authority, and 2, our control of tax increment without our consent. We have not always been successful, as you know, in trying to hold that line, but that was sort of the parameters of the things we cared most about. A number of cities have raised an additional concern, which is the reason for this amended resolution today, and that is to say we also care, we don't want the state to infringe or impair our water interests. And as we've drafted some language and run that by a couple of people, I don't think that has been vetted very thoroughly. And I need to speak on behalf of Provo City, who has expressed some concern about the specific language here and the language of sources of water supply. So what I'm here to say is the concept we're talking about is what I want to present today. And that is to say we're willing, eager, and ready to partner with the state on these economic development project areas as long as the state doesn't infringe on local land use, tax increment or our water interests without our consent. Don't get too hung up on the specific language, because if there is support for the general concept, we will wordsmith the language until we get everyone comfortable with it. My question today, and the reason I'm bringing this before the LPC, is to see if there is general support for expanding our resolution to list 3 items of importance beyond the original 2. So that's the concept here today, to expand it to include protection of local water interests, if I can use that phrase generically. So I'd be happy to take any questions or discussion on the question on the issue, but that's the issue before us, and that's the purpose of the resolution.
Lynn, just for clarification's sake, so this is not being presented as a vote on whether this resolution as written goes forward?
Correct. What this would be is, and if there's interest, I'd be happy to take a vote on the general concept, but then allow a smaller group, particularly people that have more water expertise than I do, to make sure that we get the language right, and we would bring back revised language for the business meeting at the convention.
Well, yeah, there will have to be a special meeting scheduled to adopt the resolution before the business meeting.
If I can speak to that, my understanding is that I don't know if it's the bylaws or whatever it is, Cameron, says we can approve either a resolution or a concept for a resolution. What I'm asking for today is feedback on whether or not there is support for this concept to amend this resolution. Did I say that right, Cam? Yep. Sorry, I guess somebody ought to stay at the microphone. I'm happy to take any questions either in the room or online, or if not, I'll turn it back over to Mayor Ramsey.
So this is essentially, we're supporting the concept, we'd like to work.
Roger.
This amounts to being, we support the general concept, go work on it some more. It is not a vote on sending this language to the business meeting, and I think we'll actually have to schedule another vote on the final resolution. That'll depend on what happens here.
Carson, any?
Isaac said that sounds like a good approach.
Will somebody willing to make a motion?
Okay,
I move we support it.
we have a motion to support this concept, and we have a second. Is there any discussion to the motion?
For purposes of minutes, Mark Johnson, Gil Miller.
Thank you. Any discussion online? Cameron, or Carson, I'm going to turn to you for that.
Yeah, I'll check.
Mark Stratford had a comment, and Craig Malkovich.
Yeah, do you want to just read that?
Mark Stratford said our ability to regulate growth within municipal boundaries is very much tied to our ability to determine how water is used, sorry, I have a little cursor in front of it, used. If water is part of a larger policy discussion, we should be able to determine if we want to participate or not. It's a good point.
So we actually have a motion out there to adopt.
We do have a motion, and is the threshold the same? Is it 2/3 on this as well?
This is,
I think so.
yeah, I think we ought to operate that way. This is an odd duck, but let's operate on 2/3.
Okay, all right, we are operating as
Sorry,
if this is also 2/3, and I'm asking all the attorneys that, so they're saying that's what we're doing, that's what we're doing. All right, that being the case, all in favor of approving the concept of Resolution 2021-002, Growth and Water Resources, amendment to Resolution 2017-001, as has been presented by Lynn, to add water rights or sources of water supply to those key priorities. In the room, please say aye and raise your hand. Online, please type 1 under yes. Keep your hands up for us.
Raise your hands, don't scratch your heads.
Could you put
I'm a
the
voting member.
resolution up on the?
Oh, sorry.
Do I get to vote?
Yeah, see if you get to-
Roger?
I'm sorry, my numbers are wrong. You were down there then. You put on that online.
Hold on, I forgot to switch the screen, so I'm giving people online. That's the where. So that's the,
How many?
that's the policy piece of it. Carson, can they see that online now?
Yes.
Okay. And so what we'll do, since there's support for the concept, is we will, during the week of the conference, hold a quick virtual
Where they are.
thing to wordsmith it before the
To move
business
this forward,
meeting.
got
Need
it,
a motion
okay.
on this proposed next.
Okay, but we have the total for the first one. Okay, thank you. Now, any opposed, please also raise your hand here in person or type the one under opposed online. Okay, that passes. We appreciate that. Thank you for the support of that. What will happen next is that the week of our conference, there will be a special electronic session that we'll send out to take a vote on the wordsmithing and to make sure that we have the wording as such that the resolution can be approved by this body to be sent to the full body at our business meeting during the conference. Right? Okay, thank you. I don't even know what we have next. Let's see. Okay, ARPA. We're going to talk ARPA, right? All right, Cam, take it away.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Mayor. While Liam comes up to give you a quick ARPA update, there was one other logistical thing I wanted to add. As part of this overall conversation on growth, I represent the league on the Envision Utah Board of Directors, and we are helping to co-fund a project that they are leading out on around public perceptions on growth. It's building off of the Y2 data we did 3 years ago, so it's essentially a refresh there, but more of a value study component. For their first focus group, they're looking for a handful of mayors or council members next Tuesday to be part of that dialogue, which will then build the values survey. So if you have any elected officials on this call, or if any cities are interested, just send me an email. Again, we're just looking for 5, but looking for a variety of cities to participate, and they're very comfortable with even electeds who are retiring. So if you are retiring from office but want to participate in this focus group, just shoot me a message. Okay, Liam, take it away for an ARPA update.
Okay. Not too much that we need to go over. Some important pieces. First of all, the local match assistance grant from GOPB. The deadline is on Wednesday at midnight to submit those applications in the portal. So it's this Wednesday at midnight, and then the committees will begin their work after that. So if you need any help between now and then Wednesday at midnight, you can let me know. Either shoot me an email or give me a call, and I will help you out any way that I can. Also want to make note of a lot of great tools that are coming out from Treasury and webinars and reporting guidance. If you check that out on the Treasury website, there are a lot of great tools there, and you can let me know if you need any help finding those. And I think that's it.
Yeah, you had 2 slides. I forgot to switch.
Oh, well,
You mentioned
I guess
how
we
much
don't have
money
slides.
as of last week was in the portal.
Was in the portal? Yeah, so we had a first, we had one of the meetings on a Tuesday morning, and we had already been to the 50 million for the requested, and that was a week ago, yeah. And so there was already 50 million that was submitted, so we're expecting a lot of applications, and we'll probably be, I'm guessing, 3 or 4 times the amount of what's allotted for this round. So we're hopeful that there will be more money for this program in the future, but we're really excited about all of the projects, and it'll be really helpful in expressing to the legislature the great projects that cities and towns have in Utah. So I encourage you to get in your applications by Wednesday at midnight.
Mr. Hiskey, I'm going to preempt your question about the other ARPA dollars for the rezone. We've been told for the last 3 weeks that the rule is almost ready for us to provide feedback on before it goes public, but as of last week, it still had not come out. And Liam, I forgot to bring your slides up, but there we go. Okay. Any other final? Oh, John, I thought I preempted your question.
No, thank you to Liam. We've had questions relative to see has been very helpful. I appreciate the addition of this resource to the meeting.
Well, John, thank you for saying that, because that's actually what I wanted to wrap up. We're grateful to have Liam on staff, and we're grateful to you for funding Liam's position with ARPA dollars. As I've talked to state leagues around the country, a lot of them are trying to figure out how to provide technical assistance and resources to their communities. And so we were one of the first ones to proactively try to hire someone who could be that point person. And it's kept him busy answering calls and emails and providing insight to cities across the state. So thank you for your support of that position, and Liam, thank you for your great work thus far. Mayor Ramsey, I don't know if it's back on the screen, but we've got the upcoming dates here, and I'll turn it back to you to wrap us up. And even for starting late due to technical issues, we're basically on time.
Thank you so much. Again, let me just say thank you to everyone, and I don't think I thanked Lynn. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for participating in this. I appreciate the efforts of everyone working hard, and I hope that you as cities and towns recognize the great deal of effort that's being done on your behalf. There's a lot of work that takes place that I think most of us have no idea. We really have no idea how much work is taking place, but there's a lot of it being done to try to help the best outcomes for cities specifically with legislative policy. And so thank you. All right, our next meeting is October 18th, which is after the League Conference. The conference, again, is September 29th through October 1st, and we hope that you'll join us. On October 18th, we'll meet. It's hybrid, like it is now. So you can come in person or you can join us online. We'll be giving an update from the Utah Economic Opportunities Commission, and some of the information that was shared and some of the data that's been collected, results of this survey, Cam and I will actually be sharing with the governor's office tomorrow morning with his team specifically. So please know that your questions, your concerns, your comments, your thoughts, the needs of your cities, they are being expressed. They're being shared with legislators. They're being shared with the governor's office. And it would be really helpful if each of you would take the opportunity to share those with your own legislators. That will help, because there will be policies that will be proposed this next legislative session. And so, again, please reach out to your legislators, get to know them, and share your thoughts. But we will give an update on where things are at with the Opportunities Commission, and then the working groups will report back as well. With that, unless there's any other questions, I will ask for, okay, we have a question? Yes, Kate. The paper in front of me says October 18th, and I don't have a calendar in my hand.
Blame it on sleep deprivation.
Okay.
She's right. It's December 13th.
Good job, Kate.
Okay, we keep saying December. Do we mean October?
No, she's right. Yeah.
I don't have that in front of me. Oh, okay.
This should be
The
December
slide
13th.
does, again.
Yeah.
You can see something that I can't see. Okay,
So
the
it's
slide,
December 13th.
yes. Okay, our next meeting is October 18th. Thank you for that, Kate. And then we have November 15th and December 13th, Monday, December 13th. Good catch. And that's not on my printed agenda, so I didn't even know it was on there. So thank you for that. Appreciate that. Is there anything else? If not, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. For the purpose of minutes, I can't tell who said that. Tell me your names. All right, Mayor Witt made the motion, and Kate Bradshaw was seconded that. All right, all in favor, please say aye. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for joining us online, and we'll see you September 29th.